Hi everyone, today's screencast is going to cover human defences against disease. Please make sure you've got a pen and some paper before we start. Once you've got a pen and paper, pause the screencast, write down today's LO, which is to understand how our bodies defend us against pathogens and disease. Once you've written down today's LO, have a go at these retrieval practice questions. These are questions from previous content on the infection and response topic. Pause the video now and have a go at these questions. Okay, once you finish the questions, you need to get a different coloured pen, preferably green, and mark the answers, which will be on the next slide. So pause the video on the next slide to mark your answers. As we go through the information on these slides, it may be helpful for you to make notes. So you are going to have to answer questions as we go through the screencast. It will be useful if you make notes. It will make it easy for you to be able to answer the questions. So how do our bodies defend us against pathogens? We have lots of different features that help to stop pathogens from being able to enter our body and making us feel ill. Some of these defences are called non-specific defences, and that means that they can act on any type of pathogen. There are four main non-specific defences that we're going to look at. The first one is the skin, then we have the nose, trachea and bronchi, and the stomach. So if we go with the skin first, our skin acts as a physical barrier to infection. It stops pathogens from entering our bodies. The skin also produces an antimicrobial secretion called sebum, which prevents harmful microbes from being able to grow on our skin. There are also microorganisms that live on our skin normally, and they stop pathogens, so harmful microbes, from being able to grow. Our nose has internal hairs, and this acts as a physical barrier to infection as well. Cells in our nose produce mucus, and this traps pathogens before they can enter the lungs. So if you imagine you're breathing air in, there will be microbes in that air, there will be dust particles. The mucus in your nose will trap those potential pathogens, and it will attach to the hairs. Okay, when the nose is blown, the mucus is removed, so any of those pathogens that are trapped within it are also removed. In our trachea, which is our windpipe, and our bronchi, the cells that line the trachea have hairs too, called cilia. They're much smaller than the hairs in the nose. The cells that have cilia we call ciliated cells, and you can see them here in this diagram. So this one's a ciliated cell here. You can see the cilia. Okay. The ciliated cells actually waft their hairs, so they move their cilia and they move the mucus and pathogens up towards the throat, so away from the lungs, where you can actually swallow the mucus and it will go into your stomach. These cells here are called goblet cells, and they are the cells that produce the mucus. So they actually create that mucus to allow you to trap those pathogens. The production of mucus in your airways is another type of physical barrier. So we just mentioned that you will swallow the mucus containing potential pathogens and it will go into your stomach. Now, in our stomach, we have an acid. Stomach acid does not break down food. It's part of the body's non-specific first line of defense. So the acid in our stomach is called hydrochloric acid, and while it does us no harm, it is strong enough to kill those pathogens that have been caught in the mucus, either in the airways or if they've been consumed in food or water. The stomach acid is a chemical barrier, so rather than being a physical barrier, it's a chemical barrier against infection. Now I've popped this here. This is a pH scale here, and we have really strong acids at this side and really strong alkalines this side, and then we've got neutral in the middle. So you can see stomach acid is a very strong acid. So your first task is to describe in as much detail 2 of the non-specific defences of the human body that we've just been through. So see how much you can remember first. If you've made notes, brilliant, use them to help you. You can also rewind the screencast if you are struggling. Choose 2 of the defences from the 4 we've just discussed and try to include whether they are physical or chemical barriers. Include as much detail as you can. So pause the screencast and have a go at this task. Once you've finished writing your answer, you need to get ready to mark it. So I'm going to put 4 different boxes on the next screen. You need to choose 2 of those boxes. There's 1 box for each type of non-specific defence. You need to make sure that you've got all of the information that's in the boxes. So pause the screencast now, mark your answers, make sure you've got the information in the boxes that you've chosen. Okay, so we're moving on from non-specific defences to specific defences now. If a pathogen does enter the body despite the non-specific defences that we have, the immune system will try to destroy it. Our immune system involves specific defences, meaning that the processes are specific to the type of pathogen that's entered the body. The function of white blood cells is to fight pathogens. And there are 2 main types of white blood cells. We've got lymphocytes and phagocytes. Lymphocytes fight pathogens in 2 different ways. They produce antitoxins, which bind to the toxins that are produced by some pathogens, usually bacteria. The antitoxins neutralise those toxins. Lymphocytes also produce antibodies. They help to target and destroy pathogens by binding to antigens that are on the surface of the pathogen. So antigens are a type of protein you can see here on the surface of the pathogen. Our lymphocyte has produced an antibody that fits the shape of this antigen. So this antibody is specific to this antigen. Okay, so that the antibodies produced by this lymphocyte are specific to this pathogen. So we'll move on to phagocytes now. Phagocyte action has 3 main steps or components. The first is that phagocytes are attracted to areas of infection, so areas where there are pathogens. The second step is that the phagocyte surrounds the pathogen and engulfs it. So you can see this happening here. Then enzymes that digest and destroy the pathogen will be released by the phagocyte. The action of phagocytes is called phagocytosis. So the antibodies that are produced by the lymphocytes help in the process of phagocytosis. So your lymphocytes and your phagocytes work together. The antibodies produced by the lymphocytes attach to the surface of the pathogen, and this means that the phagocyte can then recognise the pathogen as being foreign and not one of the body's cells. The antibodies also cause the pathogens to stick together, and that makes it easier for the phagocyte to engulf them. So pause the video, take some time, have a look at the diagram. Okay, your next task is to fill in the gaps from memory if you can, to summarise the specific human defences against pathogens. Write out the sentences and complete them, so fill in the blanks. Pause the screencast and have a go at this. Okay, I'm going to pop the answers on the screen. You need to mark them. Make sure that you are making corrections as well if you are getting any of the answers wrong. Okay, now your final task is to try and answer all of the following questions from memory. Then you can use your notes if you need to, or you can rewind the screencast. Pause the video, have a go at these questions. Your total marks are out of 11, and then I will put the answers on the screen and we'll mark them. These questions relate to this diagram here, figure 2, so make sure you read this caption and look carefully at the diagram to help you answer the questions. Okay, so if we look at question 1 here, describe why this is an example of a tissue. We've got a section of nasal epithelium, which is tissue from the nose. It's a tissue because it's a group of similar cells working together to perform a function. So they are not the same cells, they are similar and they work together to perform a function. Question 2, suggest a function of the goblet cells. So we can see our goblet cell here. You can have to produce mucus, secretions, and sticky fluid. You could have either one of those. Question 3, identify structure X in figure 2 and explain its role in defense against disease. So if we look, figure X here, it's pointing to a cilia. So you get 1 mark for saying cilia. The second and third mark come from the function. So we need to say, for 1 mark, waft or move the mucus, which contains or trap pathogens or microorganisms or dust particles. Either of those would get you 1 mark. And then for the third mark, we need to say away from the lungs or towards the throat. For question 4, the skin is another example of a non-specific defense against disease. It acts as a barrier to microorganism entry. Describe one other way the skin protects the body from disease. So we can say produces antimicrobial secretions. You could also say that, the microorganisms that live on the skin. Destroy or prevent pathogenic bacteria from growing. 1 mark for the first part, and then the second mark comes from this second part here. And then question 5, down here, the body's immune system protects us from diseases. Describe the different ways in which white blood cells protect us from infectious disease. So now we are looking at the specific defences against disease. So white blood cell here, WBC means white blood cell, or you could say phagocytes. Ingest or digest pathogens, bacteria, viruses. That will get you 1 mark. Your other mark would come from saying that white blood cells or lymphocytes produce antibodies. Another mark for antitoxins. And then for your final mark, you can have either of these. So antibodies destroy or kill pathogens, bacteria, viruses, germs. Antitoxins counteract, destroy or neutralise toxins or poisons. And that would give you your final mark. Make sure that you've made your corrections. Make sure that you've added up your total score out of 11.